welcome back to my channel. It's really hot today in the UK, so gonna try and keep cool while I make this video, but today's video is all about the UCAT and how I scored in the top 5%. I sat the UCAT back in 2019? Yeah, 2019, so quite a long time ago now. It was 2 years ago this week that I sat the UCAT. But I scored in the top 5%, so I thought I'd share this video and show you how I got that score for spending very, very little money. I didn't buy any courses, so I thought I'd show you guys how I did it. Okay, so as normal, I'm going to split this into sections. The first one is going to be which resources did I use like on paper and not online. The second one's going to be what did I use that was online. The third one's going to be how I split my time. And the fourth one is going to be like preparation right before the exam, like how did I target certain areas to just really hit those top marks. So firstly then, which resources did I use that were like on paper and kind of hard copies? So for me, thankfully my library at school, well I was actually at college, my library at college had a book called, I think it was 1,250 questions for the UCAT. I think at the time it was the UKCAT, but they changed the name of it a couple years ago to the UCAT. Basically it splits the UCAT into little like sections. For those of you that don't know, the UCAT has lots of different sections and each one you can prepare for separately, but when you sit the exam you do them kind of like back to back. So this book is really good for targeted practice. If you want to buy yourself the book as a new copy, or if your library doesn't have one, they're actually really cheap to get. You can buy one second hand. I would recommend doing that if you're doing it on a budget. So Depop, look at Depop, look at Vinted, maybe even eBay. If you search for this book, I'll insert a picture of it here. If you search for this book, you'll probably find it and it should be really cheap, like under £10. But yeah, this book has tons of questions in it. Some of the questions are a bit harder than they might be in the exam, but it's really good just for doing practice, for targeted practice. So that's a book I would recommend using. Other resources that I would use, like hard copies, so I made my own notes and then just read through them before, like I even started doing practice questions. What I did was I went online, looked up YouTube videos, you know, classic ones like Karma Medic. They have all these like UCAT videos. I watched those, wrote down what was going to come up in each section, so made my own notes on paper, and then like reading through them right before the exam would just help me feel that I really knew what I was going to be doing. Like I knew all about the exam and I knew exactly what the setup was going to be, and so I felt that for me personally making some hard notes was really useful. So I recommend doing that if you're the kind of person that likes note taking, if you're the kind of person that likes to really quickly go over stuff like right before the exam, just to make sure that you feel like you know what you're doing. That's another thing that I did. So let's move on to the stuff that I did online. Online resources for free, and that's my big thing here, is that you don't need to spend money. People will buy like, what's it called, like Medify, UCAT Ninja, BMAT Ninja, like there's a 6med course. Like I know some people that find that stuff helpful, and I think if you want to spend the money, you can. What I would say is so many of these companies are like prying on your low self-esteem, making you feel like you need to pay for a course in order to do well. Have self-belief. So much of your application will come from self-belief and believing in yourself and knowing that you have the resources up here to do well. And so I didn't personally pay for any courses. I used the UCAT website, had online like practice questions you can do to time, you can do them not to time, you can just like flick through them in different sections, and there's loads of questions on there. And the reason I promote this above anything else is because it's designed by the UCAT company themselves. Like they've designed these questions, they will be true to how hard some of the questions might be in the test. I think I personally found the ones online a bit harder than the actual exam, but I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. I think if anything you want it to be that way so that you're preparing with harder material, so that when you sit the actual exam you kind of feel like, oh, these are really easy questions, I've done these before, like I know what I'm doing. So the online UCAT website, and I will link that below, has had like tons of questions, and if you, by the time you've done all of them online already, you can go back and do them again and you'll have forgotten the ones that you did initially. So I would recommend that totally. Like the biggest thing I can recommend is their online testing materials. I think there's 3 or 4 practice questions and like practice tests you can do. I wrote my score down each time and then tried to log my progress. That's another thing I would recommend. So the second thing I used online was like a spreadsheet. So I used Google Sheets, and I made a spreadsheet of each paper, what I scored in each section, did I progress, like how much time did it take me, how much time did it take me over the limit for that section. Yeah, that was how I used online resources, and I found that way I could track my progress, know that I was doing material that was like accurate to the exam, and trust the material as well, because so many of these companies will just kind of like make questions, sell them to you, and then really all they're after is money. I mean, obviously it's great if they have good testimonies and students are making progress, but ultimately you're not going to get anything better than free resources, and the UCAT website is free. So yeah. Okay, so let's move on to how I split my time. So basically, I think I wanted to sit the UCAT very, very early on. I sat it right at sort of like the first week of testing. So early July I sat my UCAT because I had in mind that I wanted to sit the BMAT in August. So I was like, okay, I have a summer holiday window now where I need to sit the UCAT at one end, the BMAT at the other, and I need to allow myself time between them to prepare for the BMAT, not be worn out. We had like a family holiday in there as well, personal statement writing. I did an EPQ that summer. So year 12 summer was all a bit chaotic. So I needed to get the UCAT prep like out the way quickly and be efficient with it. So I started preparing for it on my birthday, I think about around my birthday in year 12, so like the 13th of June, mid-June. So I gave myself, not very long, I gave myself like 4 weeks to basically cram for the UCAT. And I started looking at resources for the UCAT back earlier on in the year. So I roughly had an idea of what the UCAT was. So I looked at the Medic portal, that's another online resource. I looked at the Medic portal for the setup and how the exam worked. And then from like the 13th of June, I made like a 4-week action plan, and my timetable was as follows. So I went into Google Sheets and I made like a spreadsheet, and I had 4 weeks, like a calendar, and each week I would do 1 day of section 1, 1 day of section 2, 1 day of section 3, 1 day of section 4, a day of like situational judgment, and then the weekend I'd have one rest day, so I'd have Saturday off, and then on the Sunday I'd like review the section that I'd done the worst in that week, and then I'd do the same thing the week after. I did that for 4 weeks, so I would spend 4 days in total on each section at least, 1 day reviewing them and like figuring out which section I was doing the worst in, and that gave me enough time to kind of like really nail each section. If I was finding that one section was super easy and I was doing really well on it each week, I would like reduce the time I'd spend on that section, and I'd only do like an hour a night, because bearing in mind it was June, so I still had college. End of year 12, we didn't finish until like mid-July anyway, so I think I finished college, I had a week of work experience, and then I immediately sat the UCAT. So I didn't give myself very long to sort of like, I wasn't spending all day on the UCAT. I was going to college, coming home at like 4, half 4, and then from 5 until 6:30 I would just do that one section of the UCAT that I'd like assigned for that day, and then I'd rest and like have the evening off. And I did that every day for about 4 weeks, and then the week after that I sat the UCAT. So that was how I split my time. I found it quite efficient. It meant I could cover every subject, I could do every like section of the exam. I think I personally struggled with quantitative reasoning a bit more, and as someone that quite likes maths, I was a bit like annoyed at myself. I was like, why am I really struggling with this? I think that was mainly because I think the questions online were a bit harder than in the exam. So I allocated myself a bit more time each week on that section, less time on like abstract reasoning and like verbal reasoning. I found those sections a bit easier. So I just adjusted the timetable to fit what I was doing. But I would definitely say, like, if you're cramming for, well, not really cramming, but if you've given yourself like 4 or 5 weeks, or even less, 3 weeks, make sure that you're splitting your time so that you are covering all the sections at least for the first week before you figure out like what your strongest section is and then what your weakest section is. So yeah, splitting your time, like, really good. And again, I highly recommend like Google Sheets or Excel for doing that. Okay, and then the final section is like, how did I get those top marks? How did I figure out exactly which sections I needed to work on more than others? I guess the main thing I did was by doing practice questions. You're never gonna, and you'll hear this about everything, like I've said it in my BMAT video, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. And teachers will tell you this as well when you're preparing for exams, like preparing for A-levels and mocks and stuff. The best way to find out what you need to spend most time revising is by doing practice questions. Like, it will show you where you're good, it will show you where you need to do more work. So go to the UCAT website, do their practice papers, and like find out which sections you really struggle with. And hopefully if you do that, you'll have a realistic expectation of what you'll be able to achieve in the exam, and you'll see your progress. It's like a self-motivational thing, so if you make progress over the weeks when you do practice papers and you get better and better, by the end your score will be really good. You'll have seen the progress and you'll feel really confident going into the exam. Find the sections that you're struggling the most with, spend more time on them, So for example, like I said, I found quantitative reasoning hardest, and I would just keep going over those questions, like find the techniques, look up YouTube videos. So I would say the way I used YouTube most was initially just to find out about how the exam is structured, and also reading the UCAT website. I mean, that's the most accurate place, it's up to date. So initially that was what I did, and I made notes on each section, and then after that started doing practice questions using the UCAT website and occasionally the Medic portal, because that was also free. And then once I found which sections I was really struggling with, I would target them using like doing more questions in that section, looking up specific YouTube videos for that section only, rereading my notes, like just doing as much practice as I could. Oh, and using that book that I talked about, the 1250 UCAT questions, like I use that book a lot just for specific sections because it is split really nicely, so you can target your revision if you want to. Yeah, those would be my main tips. I think there's so many other YouTubers out there that like do tips on specific sections, and I'm not going to go into depth about what each section entails, but in terms of my main tips, this is what I'd say. So use books, use YouTube and Excel and the official UCAT website, and maybe like the Medic portal as well for free resources. Don't pay for courses if you don't need to. Have self-belief. Try it on your own first before you like invest in a course. If you're really struggling and nothing's working, then maybe you can buy like an intensive course, but I would really say you don't need to. Like, what are they going to give you that the free companies and free resources can't? And then split your time wisely. You know, make a spreadsheet, stick to it, invest time looking at those specific sections you're really struggling with. And then my last bit was just to focus on the areas you need to target. Don't just do the easy stuff. If you're really good at like situational judgment, don't spend a week on it. Don't do the hard stuff. That way you'll make the most progress, and yeah, hopefully you'll do well. And I need to go and dig out the exact like sheet to find out my exact scores, but I can do that. Okay, so there was just a little break there while I looked and dug around for my sheet, but I have found it. So for those of you that are interested in what I scored in each section, I got 650 in verbal reasoning, 770 in decision making, 760 in quantitative reasoning, 740 in abstract reasoning, and that brought my total score to 2,920. And then unfortunately, although I scored in the 95th percentile with those sections, I got band 3 for the SJT, and I'm not really too sure. I came out the thing and like I was a bit shocked because when I've been doing practice I was getting like band 2, band 1, but the only thing I can think was the way the SJT is graded, and this might be useful for any of you who are feeling a bit down about if you sit the exam and you're not doing very well in the SJT. What I will say is, unless you get band 4, you are fine. Like you are ethical, you're all ethical, you're all very good and capable. And the way the SJT is graded is that your opinion and your answer is compared to the opinion of a doctor or some healthcare professionals who've sat the exam themselves. And if you're always one away from what they have put, like literally consistently throughout the exam, you will quite easily drop down to like a band 3. So you can be a band 3 and still be really, really ethical and very, very close to what the mark scheme was that year. So don't worry about it, but it's not the end of the world if you get a band 3. You can apply tactically. So I applied to Nottingham and Exeter, and I knew that at Exeter they wouldn't look at the SJT unless I scored band 4. And then in terms of my interview like invitation, they would only look at the other sections, and I knew that because I had a high score overall, I'd be fine. And the same with Nottingham. They kind of grade it, like they convert your scores into points at Nottingham. And I knew that because I had like between 700, my average score was like 700 and something, 730 was my average score, I think. I will check that. Yeah, I think so. And so I knew that I would score, like I'd get converted to quite a lot of points for my application at Nottingham. And again, they don't really look at the SJT that much, like it's not weighted as heavily. It's not the end of the world if you get a band 3, not at all. I still had 4 offers from medical schools to choose from. So, but yeah, so I scored in the 95th percentile. That's my total score. And yeah, best of luck with your applications. If you're sitting the UCAT this summer, you know, just try your hardest and don't worry if it goes a bit pear-shaped. I know people that like weren't very happy with their UCAT score and they still got 4 offers from medical schools. So it's a hard exam, do your best. And if you have any more questions, let me know, comment below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But see you guys soon, bye!